What's up, everyone? Today we are introducing a modern-day spiritual messenger who has impacted the lives of millions of people. In this lifetime, he goes by Neale Donald Walsch. And this episode is so personal to me because I came across this man's work in a much-needed time in my personal journey. You see, I never grew up with religion, and in a way, not having a deeper belief system in my life always left me continuously wondering about the beyond, really. And my co-host Alvaro and I, last year, we attended a conference called the Health Optimization Summit in London. Towards the end of that weekend, we were walking through a street and we came across a spiritual bookshop, and I really just felt an impulse to go in. I browsed around the store for a bit and came across a book that really just rang a bell. You see, in 2017, I did a masterclass on Mind Valley that was called Exploring the Ideas of Highly Evolved Beings and Preparing Yourself for Humanity's Next Evolutionary Steps. Of course, my curiosity was drawn to it, and to my surprise, the next hour and a half, I was immersed in wisdom from this man who wrote a series of best-selling books called Conversations with God. So, in this bookstore in London, my intuition told me, you are ready for this book, so go for it. And therefore, I bought it. And within a month, I dove into it, and I know what you guys are thinking. Really? You read a book about God and found yourself? Well, in other words, the information that I was about to download in this book was a complete paradigm shift. These books are an energy of their own, and they impacted my psyche in ways that I cannot begin to explain. It was a truly transformative experience, and the story behind how these books were written is a whole rabbit hole in itself. Essentially, Neale was at a breaking point in his 50s after numerous divorces, a broken neck, being homeless, and one day he wrote an angry letter to God. Suddenly, he heard a response, and all the questions that he had been asking, he was receiving the answers. And he was writing all this on a yellow legal pad. It wasn't even just a voice that was his own or thoughts that were his own. He was just responding to the impulse of what the answers were to his questions. He wrote them all down, and a couple years later, they became best-selling books. These were written notes in this man's journal. This is profoundly inspirational and mind-blowing. So Neale's conversation went on to impact the lives of millions of people, and his books were translated in hundreds of languages. They were on the New York Times bestselling list for over 200 weeks. And even a documentary was made about his story. So we are beyond grateful to channel this consciousness lifting voice and ideas to you guys. In this episode, we'll dive into the definition of pure love, a counterintuitive way to find your purpose, how to become a rememberer, and lead humanity to the one single truth in the universe. It's a very deep episode. And all of this is here for you guys to embark on your own higher purpose and elevate the species in your own unique, authentic way. All the love, guys, and treat yourself to this message that your soul needs to hear. We welcome you, Neale Donald Walsch. Neale Donald Walsch, brother, thank you for coming on the podcast.
You're very welcome. Thank you for the invitation. It's lovely to be here with you both.
I really appreciate it, Neale.
Yeah. So Neale,
how may I serve you in this moment?
Of course. Well, I've been trying to figure out where I really wanted to begin this conversation, and I came to the realization that I'm just going to let it flow. And I wanted to ask you, right now, in the spectrum of everything, humanity is going through a deep transition. And through your books, through your conversations with God, you put to the surface a lot of deep messages that humanity really needed to hear, especially for me. In my spiritual awakening, I really
appreciated the presence of your books and your conversation. I wanted to ask you, and this is also for the audience so they can get a little bit more in tune with who you are and what you do. You were, first of all, you went through a series of accidents. You broke your neck. You were going through a divorce you were going through a divorce and a marriage, and you were homeless for quite a while. And I wanted to ask you, from the point of when you were beginning to go in a better path out of that homelessness and just the suffering and the pain, what occurred to you to do at 4:23 a.m.?
Well, I was very angry, Emilio. I was very frustrated because I considered myself to have, a fair amount of talent, at least a fair amount of intelligence. I considered myself to be certainly employable and of help to others. I thought I was a pretty good person who knew enough about life. And by the way, I wasn't a young man when this was all happening. I wasn't like 27 or 37 or even 47. I was in the very early months of my 50th year. I was half a century on the planet. So I was angry. And what about how life was turning out. So I woke up at 4:30 in the morning with lots of questions, angry questions on my mind. And I couldn't go back to sleep, so I thought, I'll just get up. Who cares? It's 4:30 in the morning. So I got up and I found a yellow legal pad on the coffee table in front of me, happened to be there. And so I started writing really an angry letter to God. And I just wrote what I was feeling. What does it take to make life work? I mean, I've got all the equipment. I've got the intelligence. I've got the talent. I've got the gifts. I even have the desire. I'm not a bad person that wants to hurt anybody else. What's the problem here? What does it take to make life work? And my second question was, why does my life have to be such a continuing struggle? Ongoing struggle from beginning to end. And what are the rules? I mean, just tell me the rules. I'll play it. I promise I'll play the game, whatever the game is. Just give me the rule book. And after you give me the rule book, don't change them, because my experience is all the rules of life were changing almost from year to year, from decade to decade, for sure. So I just really wanted to get certainty. I wanted to understand what in the world is going on here. And so I wrote this angry letter to God. And that's what started the whole conversation, the whole experience, because I began receiving answers. First, I actually heard a voice over my right shoulder. And the voice simply said, "Neale, do you really want answers to all of these questions? Or are you just venting, just getting it off your chest?" I said, "Wait." And I looked around. Of course, there's nobody there. I'm in the room by myself. And I'm thinking, oh, great. Not only is my life falling apart, now I'm going crazy. I think I'm hearing voices. But I remember thinking to myself, you know what? At this stage, whatever. If you've got answers, I would sure like to know what they are.
Yeah.
And then the answers to all the questions I had been asking came to me as ideas or thoughts in my mind. It was like the voice had moved inside of my head, and the voice became the voice of my own thoughts, except that they were thoughts I never had before in my entire life. So I had the experience that the thoughts were coming from somewhere else. So after about 2 or 3 hours of this, because I was writing down everything that I was hearing, and then when I would get an answer to one of my questions, it would bring up other questions, of course. So I would write the other question and get the answer immediately. So then I would write a next question. And so pretty soon I was involved in question, answer, question, answer, question, answer, a dialogue. And I wound up thinking of it as, you know what? This feels like a conversation with God, because the answers I'm getting are answers that I never dreamt of in my entire life. never heard of, never thought of, never conceived, just answers that were so unusual and different for me, having been raised in a Roman Catholic household and family. And I thought at one point in my life that I was going to go into the priesthood. So these answers were so totally different from what I'd been used to hearing. And that's how it really all began. And I never, by the way, never sat down to write a book. It was not my intention to produce a book. I was just having a private process. I would have called it, in the old days, I would have called it journaling, just like journaling, where you maybe ask yourself a question, you get an answer. You ask a question, you get an answer. It was a journal, except that in the conversation I was told, you will make of this one day a book, and it will be read by many, many people.
When you first heard that, what was going through your mind?
Well, my first thought was, yeah, of course, yeah. I'm gonna send this middle of the night mental meandering, these scribblings on a yellow legal pad. I'm going to send this to a publisher who's going to go out and the publisher is going to say to his staff, "Stop the presses. This guy's talking to God." I knew that wasn't going to happen. Alvaro didn't even smile. Alvaro, are you listening? Hello, yeah. Alvaro. You're not even smiling. I just told a wonderful, funny story, and you're not even smiling. You're just like...
I'm sorry. I've been having some audio problems all of a sudden.
Oh, I thought that must be it. He couldn't possibly have heard me, or he would have smiled.
The joke was way too funny, man.
But anyway, Emilio, it turned out, I sent it to a publisher to test what I was hearing, to test the message. I thought, well, we'll see about that, because I knew in my heart there wasn't a chance in the world that any publisher was going to actually put a book out by a guy who claims to be talking to God. It's not going to happen. Well, not only did a publisher come along and put a book out, took my writing exactly as I wrote it, no editing, didn't change a word, wow. Simply put it out into the world exactly the way I sent it to him. Wow. And the book sold, but...
millions.
Yeah. Millions of copies, and wound up being translated into 37 languages.
Yeah. That's the most interesting part of, I think.
So I realized then that the message I received must have had some validity, or else something as extraordinary as that couldn't possibly have happened.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's the biggest thing for me with your books, is that when I started looking into it, and 37 languages, I don't know how many countries, literally, it was a transnational, transcultural message that needed to be here. Especially, like you were mentioning that in China, they were publishing this book. And the government in China is the one that publishes. So for me, it was incredible to hear that this message was breaking barriers, because even though the title is Conversations with God, it's not a religious book at all. And I wanted to hear from you why you think that this message has been so trans everything.
Well, I think because humanity is losing patience with itself. I think human beings have decided that, there must be something that we don't fully understand here about God, about life, and even about ourselves. There must be something that we don't fully understand here, the understanding of which would change everything. So I think that people all over the world really began searching. Of course, we've been searching for centuries for answers to life's biggest questions. But I think the search intensified in the past 20 or 25 years as we began to see that something isn't going right. I mean, something is really going terribly wrong on this planet and in our individual lives. surely we were intended to be happier and more joyful and more peaceful than our species has demonstrated itself to be. So I think that what happened is that when people saw this book and a few people read it, they wound up passing it on to others. It became a very, very big, what they call in New York, pass-on book. That it was passed on from one person to the next, and it was recommended by one person to another until, as you said, multi-millions of people wound up reading the book. It's estimated that around 30,000 people. Please forgive me. I meant to say 30 million.
Million, yeah.
It's estimated that around 30 million people have read this material, and the readership continues and expands every week, every month, and every year as more and more people are hearing about these extraordinary messages. But I think that's what started it all. I think that humanity finally just became fed up. Enough is enough. We're done. There must be some better way to create life on this planet.
Absolutely. And when you go into the fact that as humanity we have challenges in understanding what exactly God is, I wanted to ask you, Neale, how can we define God? I'm sure it's also evolving, as you might have said in the past. How can you define God in the present day? And if you include God and us in a dichotomy, how so?
Let me answer your question by telling you that it's not a question of what God is. It's a question, there is nothing that God is not. So if somebody asked me how I would define God, I want to suggest, and I have done so in my new book, The God Solution. There's a new book that comes out in 3 weeks called The God Solution. And I answer that question in The God Solution. What humanity needs to do now is to create, in fact, a new definition of God. So the definition, how would I define God? I would define God as a self-conscious, totally self-aware, energetic, a source of energy, the energy itself. And I would call that energy, it's an energy that we can feel, that's all sentient beings in the universe. We can feel that energy in a certain way. It creates a sensation within us. I call that feeling pure love. So if I would define God in one sentence, I would say, in my understanding, in my experience, God is pure love. Now, a thinking person might say, well, okay, then how do you define pure love? What is pure love? Define that. And the definition of pure love that I have been given is this. Pure love is an energy that when it's expressed, needs, wants, asks for, hopes for, looks for, requests, demands nothing in return. Because it needs nothing in return, because it is everything it could possibly need. That is, what I call God is the sum total of everything that exists in the universe, both physical and metaphysical. Therefore, pure love is that which needs, requires, demands, expects nothing in return. We know how to love that way. Most human beings have expressed that kind of love at least once or twice in their lives, sometimes with a little baby. Maybe it's a 3-week-old baby we're holding in our arms. It could be our child or a friend's child, but we hold that baby and we love the baby. We don't need anything back. We don't need to get anything in return. Many people feel that sometimes with a pet, with a dog or a cat or a horse, that they can pet that animal and they can really love that animal and they don't need anything in particular in return. When we can love another human being in that way, and some of us have done that, then we have understood how God loves us. So the answer to your question, in my understanding, is this: God is defined as pure love. And pure love, in my awareness, is a self-aware, self-creative, energetic expression from the source of all of life in the universe.
Wow, that's very profound. And I really love that definition. One thing for me was when I was reading, I think it was book one, and you started explaining the concept of the realm of the relative and all this, the realm of physicality that we're living in right now. That for me was a game changer because you explained that we cannot witness who we truly are without the opposite of that. And here in this realm of the relative, we are able to see that dichotomy, that parallel, the complete opposite of what we are not. So I wanted to ask you if you could further explain the realm of the relative and why our soul is down here in this realm.
My understanding is that our soul is here in order to engage the process of expressing and experiencing its true identity. And my understanding is that the soul's true identity is that every sentient being on Earth and in the cosmos, for that matter, because there is intelligent life obviously elsewhere. Science has just announced about 2 days ago, by the way, that there are 300 million planets in our galaxy alone, not in the universe, just in our galaxy of the universe, in the Milky Way, that have been assessed to be inhabitable by intelligent life. So our reason for being here is the same as it is for every sentient being in the universe. We've come into the realm of the physical so that we might experience what we know ourselves to be, individuations of divinity. But we can't experience that unless we create the opposite of what it is. And let me give you the simple example that I was given in the Conversations with God dialogue. If to use the CWG's simple example, let's say that I declare I am the light. Let's just use it as a metaphor. So metaphorically, I say I am the light. Now I can know myself as the light, but I can't experience myself as the light if I'm surrounded by light everywhere. If I'm a candle in the sun, I'll be there all right. I'll be a candle in the sun along with a billion, kajillion, gazillion other candles, but I can't experience myself as the source of light when I'm surrounded by the same thing that I am. Therefore, I will deliberately, if I want to experience myself as the light, place myself in
Darkness.
What? Of course, in the darkness. But if I judge the darkness and make it wrong, then I will have misunderstood why it was created to begin with, which is why every great spiritual tradition, each in their own way, has said, raise not your fist to heaven and curse the darkness not, but be a light unto the darkness, that you might know who you really are. Therefore, judge not and neither condemn.
Wow. And that really leads me into something that I wanted to cover with you, especially, which was this concept of the highly evolved beings, the Hebs that you talk in book 3. When I first heard that concept, I was a bit like mind blown because I started thinking about what if there was more civilized societies, more advanced societies, even past civilizations on this planet that reached a stage of consciousness that allowed them to create these technologies that eventually led to their own demise. And I think our species at the time that we're living has created these technologies again. And we talked about, and you talked about in your book, the nuclear power, all this that we're creating. that can lead to our self-destruction. But I wanted to hear from your perspective and your understanding, the highly evolved beings, how do they act? How do they carry themselves? How do they organize their systems, their paradigms, their societies?
Well, first of all, let me say that I do not believe that highly evolved beings existed on the earth in an ancient civilization, because if they were highly evolved, they would not have done themselves in.
Mm-hmm.
They would not have used the power they created in a manner which caused their own self-destruction. So we are here. We are again cycling through the same process as you've just pointed out. So it seems to me that we are a very immature, very young species of sentient beings in the universe. There are, in my understanding, civilizations in the universe of truly highly conscious, totally conscious, highly evolved beings. What's it like there? Well, I can't give you a chapter and verse description, but I can tell you broadly, there's no violence, there's no anger, there's no retribution or punishment, there's no such thing as justice, what we call justice on earth, which allows us to justify being violent and retributive and damning. There is no ownership, no sense of mine and yours, in the sense of you can't have it because it's all mine. On Earth we have this crazy idea that there's a thing called mine and yours. We even think that the Earth is ours. Get a hold of this. Human beings actually believe that the land, that is the Earth, the planet beneath their house, belongs to them. So if you discover oil or gold or some uranium or some rich mineral in the land under your property, that's yours because you think you own the Earth. And when I bring this up, people say, well, of course, I bought the land, it's mine. But then I say to them, but how far down? How far down? 6 feet? 60 feet? 60 miles? To the core? To the other side? It comes out on the other side of the planet? Because we do live on a ball, after all. Yeah. So where does your ownership of this planet end? Or is it possible that you don't own it at all? But it gets even worse than that. My dear friend, we think we own the sky. We actually imagine this. Countries actually claim air rights. That is, if you have a satellite that flies over their country, even 24,000 miles in the air, they still claim that 24,000 miles in the air, that's their air. And you can't fly through their airspace without signing an airspace agreement, a treaty of some kind. So we think we actually own the air and the earth. That's a primitive, barbaric notion. So in a civilization of highly evolved beings, no entity would hold the thought that they own the planet on which they're living or a portion of it beneath their own so-called property, nor would they imagine that their countries own the sky as high up as you can possibly imagine. They don't, nor do they think that they own each other. Males don't think that they own females, as we still think in some countries on this planet. There are still, to this day, as I'm talking to you, some countries where a female may not leave the house without getting permission from the male in the home, much less get a passport and move to another or visit another country. In fact, even in the United States, until recently, women couldn't even vote. Yeah, you heard that right. Until just a few decades ago, women did not have the right to vote. We considered them in the United States second-class citizens. These are the notions, Emilio, of an incredibly barbaric, uncivilized society. Primitive behaviors, children, acting like 7-year-olds. But we are beginning, hopefully, we can continue the process before we destroy ourselves again and eliminate life as we know it on the planet again, because we've done it before. I agree with you. And we are capable now of doing it one more time. Perhaps we will, in this particular expanse, wake up. And that's what I call the God solution, which is part of the latest book in the Conversations with God body of work.
Is that God's solution a conversation like
No.
the past 4 books?
No, it's a narrative exploration of a new definition of God and how it could change individual lives and how it could change life on the earth.
Very interesting.
Going back on when you were talking about how we as a species are still primitive, but we are progressing, how quickly can we evolve to become a more highly evolved being?
Well, I think that evolution is an exponential process, Alvaro. I think that it's not a 1, 2, 3, 4 progression. It's a 2, 4, 6, 8, 16, 32 progression. So I think it's exponential. Given that speed of the evolutionary process, I think that we're now seeing a speeding up of, or what some religions call a quickening of the spirit. We've heard about this in theology. It's called a quickening of the spirit. I think we're seeing that now in the earth. So I'm going to say, if we can get through the next 30 to 50 years, before you are my age, we should have reached a point where we have set aside our angry, vindictive, punishing, and violent ways and come to the conclusion that there's a new way to be human, and that if we embrace that new way, we can truly create heaven on earth.
Yes, we have a lot of work to, and really our generations have to step up, because this is the world that we're inheriting and we have to do something about it. I'm really intrigued to ask you, in terms of technology and in terms of our consciousness, how do you think those two play out on each other, in the sense that we may be going through this quickening of the spirit, but also we're accelerating technologically? Do you think,
Well, I'm hearing you, and yes, there is obviously a direct relationship between consciousness and technology, and consciousness now has to catch up with technology, or we'll be playing with matches in the dynamite room, to use a metaphor. So, because we have the technology now to destroy ourselves, to destroy our entire planet, in just a moment or two. So we are at a place in our development where our consciousness needs to expand rapidly to catch up with the expanse of our technological developments and our technological achievements and our technological understandings. We need to expand our consciousness, our spirituality as well. And it is going to be, you're correct, Emilio, in my estimation, it's going to be up to you and Alvaro and people your age. I'm out of here. I'm out of here in another 5 or 8, 10 years. I'm gone. But you, if you lead a normal length lifespan, if behaviors on the earth will allow you to, you have 50 more years left. That's a half century left to complete this task. And it will be up to you to become what I want to call a rememberer. You know, all we have to really do to make the transition you're talking about, to create the transformation, is to remember who we really are and why we are here in physical form. So if you become a rememberer and help others to become rememberers, then you have an opportunity to turn this whole thing around before, as I said, before you're my age.
I wanted to ask you, when you were going through this conversation and you began to awaken spiritually to these concepts, how did you approach what you just said and how, like, helping others remember, apart from the books itself, but how can someone that awakens spiritually or remembers who they are in some sense of the word start passing that message on, even if it's not through a book?
Well, by being leaders, by deciding to become a leader in the, what I want to call the remembering movement, in the rememberer movement. To become a leader, by the way, does not mean that we're saying, follow me. I'm the guy, follow me. No. A leader is one who says, I'll go first. I'll go first. So if we decide, the answer to your question is, if you decide to be the one in your community, in your group, in your area, in your nation, and in your world for that matter, to go first, then everything that you think or say or do will be a demonstration of your understanding of who you are and who everyone else is. And you will not allow a thought, a word, or a deed to escape you, to be projected by you into the world, which does not reflect your highest understanding of who you are and who we all are and why we're all here. If just a small group of people remembered that, and how can we help other people to remember it? By, of course, demonstrating it, by being a walking, living, breathing demonstration of what I'm saying here. And no one is going to give you that assignment, Emilio and Alvaro. No one is going to come along, and put a silver sword on your right shoulder and then on your left shoulder and knight you in the field like the king knights, in the field. That's not going to happen. No one is going to give you the assignment. You have to self-select. You have to choose yourself and select yourself to be one of those who seeks to model and to demonstrate the behaviors of a highly evolved being. Mm. We've put up a website on the internet for people who are interested in that. I have selfselected.com. I have selfselected.com.
Oh, wow.
And it's for those who want to select themselves, and it hopefully gives them the tools, or at least leads them to become more familiar with some of the tools, which would allow them to demonstrate their highest thought of who they really are. Remember that Conversations with God told us that the whole purpose of life is to recreate yourself anew in every golden moment of now, in the next grandest version of the greatest vision ever you held about who you are. That's the purpose of life, as I understand it. And very few people are living that purpose. No, we're out there with a whole different agenda. Get the guy, get the girl, get the car, get the job, get the house, get the spouse, get the kids, get the grandkids, get the better job, get the better car, get the better house, get the better spouse.
It's a game.
Get the office in the corner with your name on the door. Get the building on the corner with your name on the building. And then finally, get the gray hair, get the retirement watch, get the sickness, and get the hell out. And we think that's the formula for life. And we have been living that formula. Billions and billions of people have been living that formula for thousands and thousands of years. It's up to you and Alvaro and others in this next generation to change our collective minds about the agenda of the soul. No pressure.
No pressure.
It's difficult, the rat race. Emilio and I have discussed this.
No, it's not difficult. See, because even if you win the rat race, you're still a rat.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Alvaro, that was supposed to make you laugh. I'll tell you when the
not
jokes.
feeling it today.
I'll tell you when the jokes are coming. Here comes the joke. Even when you win the rat race, you're still a rat. So the idea is to get out of the rat race and move to a different agenda. And that's the opportunity that the young people among us, that's the opportunity that you have to demonstrate, not only to the older ones, but to those who are younger than you. Because there are even people who are younger than you, children and the children's children who will come after you, and they will be looking to you to demonstrate, to illustrate, and to model the behavior of what it means to be a new human and a highly evolved being. But you have to remember, you have to be one of the rememberers.
Thank you, Neale, for that. But I want to expand more on how to model ourselves and becoming that highly evolved being, because I have a feeling that there is a theological crisis. There's a crisis of, as you've said, that there isn't the belief systems that hope and it's being altered, right? And that's part of, being part of the rat race. I wanted to ask, how involved should we be?
Well, there's no should. Let's take the word should out of the sentence. Conversations with God says, don't should on yourself. Okay. So that was a joke. So conversations with God says, don't should on yourself. In other words, take the word should out of the sentence. There's nothing you should do. How involved should we become? How much of a model should we decide to be? No. It's voluntary. It's not, there's no should about it. How involved do we choose to be? How involved do we choose to become? How active do we choose to demonstrate the highest thought we ever had about ourselves? That's a decision you make in every moment, Alvaro, with everything you say, with everything you think, and with everything you do. So each moment places us in a space of choice. I see. I get to decide again who I am, why I'm here, and what I would wish to model for those who come after me and for those who live alongside of me. It's really quite simple.
Absolutely. No, I understand. I really wanted to expand more on the sense of what are those tools when you are giving us, that website. How involved is knowing God and being more aware of that?
It's as involved as you choose for it to be, but I can tell you the fastest way to experience it in my awareness. The fastest way to experience our oneness with God and our divinity is to cause another person to experience their oneness with God and their divinity, which is, when you think about it, what every great spiritual master, both male and female through the years, has ever done. You can't name a spiritual master who hasn't done exactly that. So the fastest way to become involved, to use your word, in the process of experiencing our oneness with divinity and to express it, is to cause another to experience and express their oneness with divinity. And if you move through your life with that as your primary objective, you will not only change your life, you will change the life of every person whose life you touch. And they will never forget when you passed their way.
Yes. A lot of young people, we sent out a survey shortly ago asking our audience what type of topics that they would be most interested in. And the number one topic that showed up amongst our generation, people from 18 to 24, selected the section saying, finding my purpose in life and work. So right now we're answering a lot of questions regarding that.
You can't find your purpose in life and work. You have to create it. Life is not a process of discovery. It's a process of creation. Mm-hmm. If you're trying to find your life purpose or your life work, you can look behind all the trees, under all the rocks, wherever you want to look. And because it's not there, it doesn't exist. Mm-hmm. No one would assign you a life purpose and then not tell you about it. Why would God do that? Let's pretend just for a minute that there is such a thing as your life purpose. Would God assign you a life purpose and then say, let's not tell him what it is. Let him search for it for 50 or 60 or 100 years. Look at him down there trying to figure it out. It's like hiding Easter eggs. They can't find the Easter eggs. God wouldn't do that. God doesn't say, I have given you a purpose, but I've hidden it from you. God says, I have given you the power and the ability to decide on your own what your life purpose is going to be. And once you make that decision, you can then create it. So stop waiting around for the sign to appear. It's a sign. Neale, it's a sign. I just saw the sign. There is no sign. There's only you deciding in the first person what your life purpose is.
That is so powerful.
And when you decide that your life purpose is to touch other people in a way that allows them to remember who they really are and to express the divinity within them, the way for you to do that in the real world will suddenly show up for you. It'll just arise in your experience without you having to look for it. Mm-hmm. Here's a daring thing to say. I'm going to invite all of you, when you leave this program today, to say this to yourself. Don't say it out loud, because if you say it out loud, people may have a difficult time reacting to you. But say it in your mind. Whenever you meet anyone, an old friend, a lover, a member of your family, or a total stranger, whenever you cross paths with anyone, say it in your mind, these words: I have come that you may have life and that you may have it more abundantly. Your life will be made better. Your life will be made better because I have come this way. If you say that every day in your mind regarding everyone whose life you touch, your life will change within 60 days. You won't know what hit you. You won't know what happened. And all of a sudden, opportunities to express your physicality in particular ways will arise in your world. I didn't sit down to write a book that would change the planet's idea of God. That simply happened out of my deep desire to express and experience the truth of my being. I chose. That much I did choose. I didn't sit there and say, I think I'll write a best-selling book. But I did say, I want my life to be a demonstration of divinity, wisdom, clarity, compassion, patience, understanding, and love.
I was listening to a YouTube video. I think it was a long time ago, because it was you having a conversation with Eckhart Tolle, and he looked pretty young. So you looked incredible. But you asked him that, you were saying to him that it's sometimes difficult because we have this understanding, you have this understanding of what it means to be divine, what it means to have compassion. But in our day-to-day life, it's sometimes difficult to embody that always.
Unless it isn't anymore. Practice makes perfect.
Yeah.
It's difficult to play Chopin on the piano. It's difficult to paint a picture that is like Rembrandt. It's difficult to play a good game of tennis, for that matter. It's difficult to do almost anything until it isn't anymore. Practice makes perfect. You don't want to play tennis with me because I'm going to beat you every time. Even as young as you are, I will beat you at tennis. Do you know why? Because I practiced. And you probably haven't. So you're going to get out there and say, how can this old guy beat me? Because he's been practicing for 30 years and you've been practicing for 30 minutes.
Yes. I've heard you talk about that right now. There's a huge alienation that's going on, and a huge division, separation among races. We've seen these protests going on in the U.S., and I wanted to ask you how we can start igniting more collaboration, not only within countries, but globally, because at the end, it's not really the competitive lens of the world that is going to awaken us and get us out of this. It's more the collaboration aspect of it. How can we start applying more these principles?
By sharing the message of unity, by ending and helping others end the illusion of separation. It is the idea that everything is separate from everything else that has caused the alienation that we are seeing, not just in the United States, but all over the world. Alienation between people, natives and so-called foreigners, between people with differing sexual orientation, gays and straights, between the genders, male and female, between the political polarities, conservative and liberal. Alienation, 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 all over the world, not just in the US. Because the notion that we are separate from each other has overtaken the species. So how can we turn that around? By becoming messengers of a single human truth, the truth of our non-separation, the truth of our oneness, by allowing ourselves to demonstrate in everything that we think and say and do that you and I are one, and that there's no separation between us. That means that what I do for you, I do for me. And what I fail to do for you, I fail to do for me. It's really as simple as that. And each individual can become the demonstration of that truth. To the degree that you do, to the degree that you become a rememberer and assist others to remember these fundamental, foundational truths, to that degree, you can make a difference. By the way, I know it's tempting to think, yeah, but what can one person do? I mean, what can one or two of us do? Even Emilio and Alvaro, what can the two of us do? Not much. But you know what? Every great human movement has been started by a single person. Somebody, somewhere, had a great idea and turned it into a movement that touched millions of people. So never imagine that one person can't start a process that can change the world. It's the only thing that ever has.
Gave me the chills.
It's inspiring because we have a path, and it can be difficult sometimes for us, growth wise, and it's true,
Unless it's not difficult.
But
it becomes no longer difficult
practice.
not only when we practice, but when we begin to understand why things are happening. Why difficult circumstances arise in our life. I'll give you a little clue around that. What I practice when difficult circumstances arise in my life is gratitude. Gratitude is a tremendous, tremendous healing energy. And when the first thing that I can say when something bad happens in my life, I get a flat tire, or I wind up getting a traffic ticket, or whatever it might be that's not a happy circumstance. The first thing I try to say is, thank you, God. Thank you, God, for another chance to see and demonstrate who I really am. And that energy of gratitude, which is such a positive force, actually projects out from us into the outer world and can often have an impact on the very experience that we're undergoing. We have a flat tire. Instead of getting out of the car, oh, God, a flat tire, I don't need this. What's the matter? Why can't life be nicer? Instead of that, we say, thank you, God. Thank you, God, for the opportunity for me to declare and experience who I really am. And just then, another soul parks their car. They see what happened to us on the highway. They pull up. They get out of the car. They see that I'm an older person. They look at, I'm practically 80. They say, hey, look, I'm only 35. How about if I change this tire for you? I said, wow. Really? Are you serious? Wow. And they change the tire. And we both drive off. And I experience, wow, what a direct encounter with the process that gratitude changes the exterior circumstance and can transform it right then and there into a moment that brings joy and not a moment that brings anxiety and anger. I've seen this kind of thing happen over and over in my life. So that's one tool that I can give you. That's a very powerful tool to share when you begin offering your meetings. When you start meeting with those who are rememberers, you're going to start a group called Rememberers. And it'll be about remembering who we really are. And you'll give people that tool of gratitude as one of many devices that can change their experience right here, right now, on the ground, in everyday life.
Well, becoming a member, I love the sound of that.
There's an organization in the world called AA, Alcoholics Anonymous. They have spontaneous meetings. People meet all over the world, by the way. There's probably not a city in the world where there's not an AA group. And they meet on a regular basis, and they support each other in living into a larger truth. That's what rememberers are going to do. Rememberers are going to have meetings all over the world, and they'll support each other in remembering who they really are and then demonstrating that. It's really an interesting process and an interesting idea.
Absolutely. And when relating to gratitude, I'm still learning a lot about gratitude. how can we have a mixed emotions in the sense of, can we feel grateful, for example, that your God is challenging me with a flat tire, but at the same time there is an overwhelm of how am I going to solve such issue?
Well, first of all, God is not challenging you with a flat tire or any other bad thing. God's not up there creating challenges for us. We are doing that for ourselves collaboratively. That is, we are collectively creating our exterior world experience. For instance, to use the example that I just used, if you're really thinking deeply, not just thinking on the surface, but thinking deeply, who created that flat tire, me or the guy who pulled up behind me and offered to change it? I mean, who created the circumstance? Or is it possible that both of us created it simultaneously? So let's be clear that just like we're all creating this program right now, who's creating this program? You, Emilio, Neale, or all the people who are watching it? Ah, I see. Now, the prayer, how I use gratitude is I say, thank you, God, for helping me to understand that this problem has already been solved for me.
Yeah.
Wow.
It really helps to see certain situations like that from a higher perspective. As you're saying, like, this experience is allowing me and teaching me something that I need to know. And I really resonate with
It's not
that.
teaching you anything because there's nothing to learn.
Reminding.
Conversations with God makes it very clear we're not here to learn anything.
Mm-hmm.
This is not a school, but we are remembering. So we're being reminded of what we already know. Look outside the window. There's a huge tree outside my window. It's an oak tree. You know, there was a time that oak tree, which is huge, it's about 4.5 feet wide. It's about 50 or 40 feet high. It's a huge tree. But there was a time when that tree was a seedling, a seed no bigger than my fingernail on my little finger. But that seed contained all that the tree needed to know to be what it is today. The tree hasn't learned anything. The tree hasn't learned anything. It's just grown into the originating information in the seed. And if God so loved the trees, would she not all the more love you? Of course.
Yeah.
So he has placed in you all of the information you need to know as well to grow into a direct experience of who you really are, that magnificent, extraordinary, glorious essence of divinity. So it's not about learning anything, it's about remembering. And the fastest way to remember is to cause someone else to remember.
I love that. I really love that concept. And we know that you have given us so much wisdom. We wanted to start wrapping all this up. Alvaro and I have prepared a couple of final questions to close out this program, this podcast. But before that, we wanted to allow you to tell our audience where they can learn more about you, where they can find your books, and all of this.
Well, all they have to do is go to nealedonaldwalsch.com. And my name is on the cover of all the books. You have to spell it right, because if you misspell it, the internet is unforgiving. It won't get to me. But if you spell it the way you see it on the cover of the books, you go to nealedonaldwalsch.com. There you will find many opportunities and many ways in which we can stay connected. We have created, let's say, a universe at CWG that has 4 levels. Level 1, you can stay connected. Level 2, you can integrate the material into your daily life. Level 3, you can be mentored individually to move into a direct expression of it. And level 4, you can become a leader and say to others, I'll go first. So there are 4 levels at which you can become involved in the gaining of practical ways to use conversations with God's messages in your daily life.
Wow, I love that. And personally, my remark, I wanted to leave people with this. And Neale's book, for me, have been such a radical transformation in my spirituality and then in my day-to-day life, because I learned to see things different. One of the highest truths that are in that book is that we are all one and we are abundant. So we have enough. And that's two concepts that you can directly take away and start understanding day to day. The final questions, one of the final questions that we have is related to what this podcast means to us. So we named this the energy motto. And we're going to explain a bit what energy means to us. And the question goes like this: what is one thing that wakes you up in the morning? Or in other words, what is one thing that ignites the flame within, which could be reframed as the energy, which are the untapped sources of internal energy that humans hold to unveil extraordinary physical, mental, and spiritual capabilities?
Awareness and desire. Awareness of who I really am and why I'm here. That is why I'm on the earth in the realm of the physical, and desire to express and experience that. And so I have both in my life, both awareness and desire. I didn't always. When I was in my 30s, in my 20s, in my 40s even, I didn't have awareness or desire. But when I turned 50, so late in life for me, you don't have to wait until you're 50 years old. But when I turned 50, I began to increase my awareness and expand my desire. And then with the experience of the conversations with God dialogues, both of those qualities exploded in a sense within me. So each morning I wake up now with awareness of, wow, one more day, I get one more day. Why am I here? I'm aware of why I'm here. Not to change the world. I'm not here to change the world. I'm here to, in my understanding, to express and experience the grandest idea I ever had about who I am. Or to put it in simple language, I'm here to experience divinity flowing through me, in me, as me. And desire is the second energetic. Yeah, I desire that. That's what I desire in my life. I'm done with my life being a boring, ho-hum journey through days and nights. Oh, here we go again. Yeah. No, I want my life to be the greatest adventure in the human experience. The adventure of becoming, expressing, and experiencing my true identity as an individuation of divinity. And that's what I desire, and that's what pulls me right out of bed every morning. Let's get going. Let's not waste a minute.
Beautiful.
Wow. It's difficult to understand. I mean, actually, no, I'm not going to say that again. But it's so much beautiful information is just coming in. So thank you for that, Neale, once again. And we usually have one final question that our listeners can really enjoy, and that's: what is your final nugget of wisdom? What is your final tip for the listeners?
Your life is not about you. I ask God, please, just tell me in one sentence or one paragraph. You don't have to give me books and doctrines and dogmas and entire theologies. Give me it in one paragraph. Just give me the secret. God said, okay, all right, fair enough. Here it is in one paragraph. Neale, your life is not about you. I know you think it is, but it's not about you. It's about everyone whose life you touch and the way in which you touch it. And yet, in a circular way, it is about you because there's no difference between you and the person you're touching. So in that sense, your life is about you. But it starts with getting the focus off of this. The focus is not over here. The focus is over there. What can I say, offer, give to you that could cause you, the person whose life I'm touching today, to experience who you really are. You know, that's the kingdom of heaven. And that's what Jesus meant when he said, don't go around asking, what are we going to eat? What are we going to drink? How are we going to clothe ourselves? Seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all these things will be added unto you. Sweethearts, it's really very simple. So the final wisdom nugget, your life is not about you. It's about everyone whose life you touch and the way in which you touch it. Live your life that way for the next 30 days. Just try it as a month-long experiment. But be careful. You're going to love what happens, and you're going to change everything you ever thought was important in your life.
Yeah. Let me tell you, I really love this feeling right now that I'm having, because a lot of the interviews, when I'm not completely conscious, I start thinking that it's for me, like I'm getting this knowledge. But with you and with some other interviews that we've had, and hopefully with practice, I will develop this feeling, is that I know Alvaro might be feeling this as well, is feeling as like we're a channel towards something greater than us. And I really love that feeling. And thank you for everything. Thank you for embodying that wisdom, that knowledge, that love and compassion. We are so grateful to have had this conversation with you.
It's been a joy to be here, and I thank you for the opportunity to share these messages.
Thank you so much, Neale. Once again, I appreciate everything that you said today, and I hope our listeners also will be touched by your words.
It's an activation of the soul.